So this story was taken by an online post. It was a quiet evening, the kind of night where the air felt still, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long shadows through the trees. Brian, a Marine who'd just come back from Iraq, was out in the woods, hunting coyotes. Alongside him was his best friend, Boot. He was new to the life of a Marine, fresh out of boot camp, full of that raw energy only a new recruit has. They had known each other for years, both growing up in the same small town, in a place where the desert met the forest. Not many people came out here, but for them, it felt like home. "Remember, the coyotes tend to stick close to the hills," Brian muttered, his voice low, but sure. He had hunted these woods before, and he knew the land like the back of his hand. It wasn't just the animals that kept him coming back. There was something about these woods, something he couldn't explain, that had always drawn him in. Boot, still getting his bearings, nodded. He'd never been out on a hunt like this before, but he trusted Brian. Together, they set off into the darkness, guided only by the light of the moon and the sounds of the night. The crunch of their boots on the dry leaves was the only noise, besides the occasional howl of a distant coyote. "Stay quiet. We don't want to spook them," Brian reminded him, eyes scanning the shadows. For a while, everything was just like any other night in the woods. The eerie calls of the coyotes echoed around them, growing louder as they moved closer. They had their sights set on a pack that had been causing trouble on local ranches. They knew the routine: get close, stay hidden, and wait for the right moment. But tonight, something felt off. As they crept through the underbrush, Brian began to notice little things that weren't quite right. The air seemed heavier, like something was watching them. It wasn't the kind of feeling you'd get from a predator nearby, but something deeper, something that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. "You feel that?" Brian whispered, pausing for a moment. Boot stopped next to him, looking around. "Yeah, it's different. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't feel right." Brian nodded. "It's probably just been a while since we've been out here. Maybe the coyotes have changed up their game. Let's keep going." They continued on, but the strange feeling didn't go away. The night seemed quieter now, almost too quiet. The coyotes, who usually yipped and howled to mark their territory, were silent. It was as if the whole forest had gone still. Brian's instincts were on high alert. As they got closer to the den, something caught Brian's eye. It was subtle at first, just a flicker of movement in the shadows, but it was enough to stop him in his tracks. He signaled to Boot to stay still, and they both froze. There it was again, a rustling in the underbrush. It wasn't the usual sound of coyotes moving through the trees. This was different. It was too controlled, too deliberate. "What the hell is that?" Boot asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know," Brian muttered, his gaze fixed on the shadows. "But we need to be careful." They crept forward slowly, their eyes darting between the trees. The further they went, the more unsettled Brian became. The feeling that something was wrong grew stronger. As they neared the den, the sounds of the coyotes' cries grew louder, but there was a strange quality to them. They didn't sound right, not like the usual howls. It was almost as if something was imitating them. Brian turned to Boot, his face pale. "This isn't right. These aren't coyotes." Boot looked at him, confused. "What are you talking about? Of course they're coyotes. What else could they be?" "I don't know, but whatever it is, it's not good." They were close now, only about 25 yards from the den. Brian could feel his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't know why, but everything about this situation screamed danger. The woods were too quiet, the night too still. The strange cries grew louder, more frantic, and that's when it happened. Out of nowhere, a figure darted out from the trees, its shape monstrous and unnatural. It was tall, too tall, with pale, almost ghostly skin. Its eyes glowed with a dull, unnatural light, like something that didn't belong in the world of the living. It was something that didn't make sense, like a creature out of a nightmare, and for a moment Brian froze, his mind struggling to comprehend what he was seeing. But then instinct took over. "Boot, run!" Brian shouted, his voice cracking with panic. Without thinking, they both turned and bolted, running through the woods, the creature close behind. Brian's breath came in ragged gasps, his legs burning with every step, but the thing behind them was faster. It was relentless, closing in on them with every passing second. The woods had turned against them. What was once familiar was now a maze of darkness and fear. Trees loomed like silent watchers, their twisted branches reaching out like claws. Every direction felt like the wrong one, and the creature, it wasn't just hunting them, it was toying with them. As they ran, the air seemed to grow colder, the silence more oppressive. Brian could hear the creature's footsteps now, slow and deliberate, like it was savoring the chase. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. He had faced danger before, but nothing like this. Nothing that felt so wrong. It was then that Brian realized something. This wasn't just a creature. It wasn't just some animal. This thing, whatever it was evil, pure evil. And it had been waiting for them, drawing them in with its false cries, with its twisted imitation of the coyotes. They reached a clearing, but it was no sanctuary. It was a trap. The creature cornered them, its eyes glowing with malevolent intent. Brian and Boot stood back to back, their rifles raised, but they both knew it was hopeless. The creature wasn't something they could fight with weapons. It was something far worse. Brian's heart raced as the creature stepped closer, its gaping maw opening wide. He could feel his legs shaking, his mind screaming for a way out, but there was none. The creature was upon them. And in that moment, Brian realized that no matter how much he fought, how much he ran, he couldn't escape the darkness that had followed him into the woods. The next day, a search party ventured into the woods but found no trace of Brian and Boot, as if the forest had consumed them whole. Whispers of coyotes and eerie happenings lingered, yet the truth remained elusive.